This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, you can get the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms and their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Well, when we last talked to Adam Caplan, we couldn't hear him because it was opening day. We were at Maynard's. It was so packed. And he broke the news on the air that the Eagles have traded Haason Reddick to the Jets. Well, now that the dust has settled, Adam Caplan, we welcome him into the show. And now we want to know, what's the plan, Stan, now that Haason Reddick is gone for this season, and they're not getting a pick for 2 years on that one?
Yeah, and I won't be coy, Roy, so let's get right to it. You like that, huh? See, I'm old enough to know what that means. So those of you over 40 might have known what Mike and I were talking about, little Steve Miller, or Paul Simon, excuse me. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, Bryce Huff will line up in Haason Reddick's left spot. He lines up on the left side. So Huff has played a majority of his career, not all of it. He's played a little right, but he's played more left than right. So he'll line up there. Josh Sweat, as of now, who took a pay cut. He's on the final year of his deal. He took a pay cut of $6 million, but right now he's penciled to start. Opposite Huff, Nolan Smith will be the third edge rusher. Brandon Graham and Zach Bond. And we're going to stick Zach Bond here. We were told that Bond's going to line up inside and outside with them. We actually put his contract details on our Patreon page for those who have Patreon this morning. And it's a little bit better. His contract's a little bit better than I thought, Mike, to be honest with you. It does tell us that he's going to play. He could play a little bit more significant role than we were led to believe, Mike, based on his contract structure. So he's going to factor in. But it doesn't mean, Mike, based on what they have. Now, they have a couple of back-end guys like Julian Aquara and Terrell Lewis, two former third-round picks who've been disappointing in their career somewhat due to injury. Those guys will have a chance to make it. Particularly Aquara, he's got some guaranteed money. But the guys who are really going to be factors are Huff, Sweat, Smith, and Bond a little bit, Graham a little bit. And at 22, Mike, and I can't emphasize this enough, no matter what they've done so far, that will not preclude them from drafting an edge rusher. Because remember, Mike, it's about the future in the draft. Sweat's contract's up. After the season, Bond's contract is up. Graham's contract's up. Terrell Lewis, Aquara. The only edge rushers under contract after the season are Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith.
So let's dive into this a little bit. Bryce Huff. What is Bryce Huff in comparison to Haason Reddick? If I just said they're flip-flopping those two, is that fair? Are they looking for Huff to basically replace Reddick?
In a way, sure. I mean, I know it's simplistic. I know a lot of people are saying it. Sometimes I shoot that stuff down, but there's some truth. Huff is longer. He's obviously significantly younger. He's roughly about 5 years younger. But Haason is a much more accomplished player, more explosive. Haason is shorter. He's about 3 inches shorter than Bryce Huff. I know people talk about his run defense. They didn't sign Bryce Huff to they're not worried about his run defense. It's something they can work on. It's really simply about this. Can he be a high-quality edge rusher? The Eagles believe that he can. He hasn't proven that in a starting role because he's never been a starter. He's been a part-time player. But Steve's pretty good. He's an intriguing player. Been a great story. He's an undrafted free agent from Memphis. We're going to have his former head coach, Ryan Silverfield, on with us. We know Ryan a little bit, out of Memphis, and we're going to probably talk to him soon for Inside the Birds. And we look forward to finding out why the heck was he not drafted. That's a crazy story, Bryce Huff. But he's got the length. He's young. He doesn't have any kind of injury history. But again, he's been on injured reserve one career. But from what we understand, talking to people who've worked with him, he's really not a guy who gets hurt a lot. It's just had a couple injuries. But they've invested a lot in him, Mike. They've got a 2-year structure on his deal. He'll make $34 million over the first 2 seasons. They can get out of it, let him a dime after the first 2 years. But they've invested a lot in 2 years, and clearly, Mike, they believe Bryce Huff is going to be a major factor, or they would have done it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Josh Sweat, they restructured the deal. He had a up and down year last year. But Nolan Smith, do they have big plans for him, or is he somebody that, hey, we'll find out at camp?
No, he'll be the third. He was basically better on the depth chart. really relegated to special teams. In fact, as I think Mosher saw last spring, and it wound up happening, because Jeff noticed he lined up at inside linebacker. Well, golly, he did. With the Eagles, he lined up a little bit as an off-the-ball linebacker, but he's drafted to be edge rusher. You don't draft an off-the-ball linebacker with this football team in the first round. That doesn't happen. So he's going to line up as their third guy. Now, how much he plays, 15% of snaps, 40%? We don't know yet. That, on your question, Vic Fangio of the Vic Fangio scheme, kind of like the Penske file, Mike, you got to get the guy. He'll figure that out as they go along, as he learns them, as he's around him, he and his new revised coaching staff here. The thing about Nolan Smith is pretty sharp kid, from what I understand, talking to people who scout him for the draft. Explosive, but he's a smaller frame guy. He's got to get stronger physically. And Sweat, obviously, is a big guy. Long arms. Big year for Josh Sweat. Teams like it when guys are on their last year of the deal. They have a lot to play for. He took a pay cut. He just turned 27, Mike, last week. He has a lot to prove. This is a major year for Josh Sweat.
No doubt about it, and obviously he gets that pay cut, so he's going to have to prove once again that that he deserves that playing time, because last year, man, he had a rough end of the year there. And then the other guys, you mentioned Okwara, Lewis, Zach Bond, Brandon Graham. Are they counting on one of those four guys to kind of step up and be something, or is that just gravy?
Mike, they're called what we call back-end players, but let's move this forward. Graham's contract's up. I mean, most people think this will be BG's last year, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Smith is going to be on the roster after the season, so will Bryce Huff. It would be nice if they could find a third or fourth pass rusher. Terrell Lewis tell you what, he's what you call body beautiful, 6'5" and a quarter, 260, been hurt a lot, was a third rounder in 2020 with the Rams, was a disappointment, but he's got a lot of ability. Played for the Alabama program, which the Eagles are very close to. They know that program very well. Joe Panunzio has been an assistant with the Eagles for going on like 11 years. He used to work for that program, so they know it. So they know this player. Okwara's got a lot of talent, good traits. He just has been a disappointment. It would be nice if one of these guys does well, where they want to bring him back to be a good bench player. That's what Howie's doing with Julian Okwara, Terrell Lewis, Thomas Booker. By the way, now he's a defensive tackle. He's a former fifth rounder for Houston. Howie's done this over the last 3 to 4 years. He's looking for these back-end players that, because, Mike, their back end of the roster was awful last season. If you want to know why the Eagles fizzled, of many reasons, when guys weren't playing well, they couldn't turn to these younger players because they just didn't have anyone they trusted.
Yeah. Adam Caplan, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. Let's go to what happened yesterday with Reed Blankenship. He gets a 1-year extension. He said he thought it was an April Fool's joke when his agent called him.
Yeah, Buddy Baker. Yeah, Buddy. So it's interesting. So Reed Blankenship out of Middle Tennessee State, Mike, has been a phenomenal story of development. This is a great job by Howie Roseman and his staff to find this guy. To this day, I don't know why he was drafted. I know the knock on him is a lack of foot speed. We've talked about this Inside the Birds a lot. Now, we haven't got the contract yet because it was just signed. It takes usually 2-3 days for us to get it. I'm interested to see what the contract structure looks like, but really in the end, Mike, I don't believe, and I know they like Blankenship. He's been a great story, and City Brown's coming back from a torn ACL. Whether he's ready to contribute right away in September remains to be seen. But right now, it's obvious what this thing looks like. It's Gardner Johnson, it's Blankenship, and that's really it right now. They need upside, they need depth. They'll look to add one more guy for training camp. It could come in the draft, maybe as early as the third round, depending on how many picks Howie Roseman keeps here, because he likes to wheel and deal. But he's a smart guy. He's instinctive. He can hit. He can tackle. But it's just a lack of foot speed. That there's a saying in scouting. I remember getting this from a guy who had his area. Blankenship knows where he wants to go, but he can't always get there quickly enough. And that's certainly been the issue with him, and why some people think he'd be better as a third safety. But clearly, right now, he'd be a starter.
Well, I was going to say, so does this mean that they look at him as a starter? Do they view Reed? Because a lot of people say, hey, he's a great third guy, but the Eagles say, no, he's not a third guy. He's a starter.
No, as of now, Mike, on April 2nd, if the season started today, he doesn't. He would be a starter next to Gardner Johnson, who could play inside. He could play safety, corner. We know that. So in the end, Mike, nothing on this contract. The early word we got, it will not stop them from drafting a safety who could potentially start down the road. But Blankenship will be with the team through 2025. They just extended it 1 year. What it's saying is we got this pick right. We want him to still be with our football team, and it's not going to preclude them from drafting anyone. But again, right now on April 2nd, he would be a starter.
We're talking with Adam Caplan, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN from the Inside the Birds podcast. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast on podcasting platforms and, of course, on their YouTube channel. A lot of off-season stuff and the draft. We're going to start looking forward to the draft. But before the draft, let's take a look at the NFC East and where these teams stand, because no team has won the division back-to-back season in 20 years. The year was 2004. Is this finally the year? There's a logjam. This is interesting. The odds on the East are very intriguing.
Well, this stunned me. So for Sports Grid, Scott Farrell and I were talking yesterday. I agree with these odds, okay? And I'll explain why. So the Cowboys and Eagles are plus 125. Commanders and Giants are plus 900. Commanders and Giants are in a rebuild. There's no way they're winning the division. And yes, the Eagles were, when they won that, when they were last team to win back-to-back, they had won 4 in a row, 0-1 through 0-4. So, Mike, the Cowboys have lost 2 pieces in the offensive line. Their left tackle and their center. That's a concern. They're going to have Mike Zimmer comes in with a revamped defense. His defense is completely different from the one that Dan Quinn ran. So there's going to be an adjustment period there. So they've got issues in their offensive line, new defensive scheme. A little bit of some issues in their secondary with performance and injury. So they may not be as good. Eagles, we know. They're going through the new defensive coordinator. Jason Kelsey's retirement. Fletcher Cox's retirement. This team does not look as good. Now, again, we're on April 2nd. There are going to be more additions. Draft, free agency, potential trades, you name it. Howie Roseman is a wheeler dealer. We'll see what this thing looks like come August. But you could question whether they're as good. So I don't always agree with the odds makers when they put these divisional feature odds out, but at 125, it would be hard. Now, obviously, if you go with the smart money, well, don't pick the Cowboys. They won the division last year. Go with the Eagles.
Exactly. The fact, though, that they're both tied at 125 and that the other two are both at plus 900. I found that both being at 900 interesting because usually you think like, hey, there's a separation between that third team and the last team. But I thought the Commanders right now would be a little bit above the Giants. I was a little surprised by that.
I agree because the Giants really overachieved 2 years ago. I mean, they came out of nowhere and they actually won a playoff game. They crushed the Vikings, and then reality hit them. Giants have a bad offensive line. They have not drafted well in years. They addressed it in free agency, so we'll see how better they are. They need lack of playmakers on defense. That's why they made the trade for Brian Burns. So we'll see. They got issues at quarterback, issues at receiver. Washington, they've got a new front office, new owner, new coaching staff, a lot of new players. They signed 12 free agents. They're in everything is changing. Their offensive defensive schemes are changing. So. Yeah, they're not winning the division. So, yeah, the smart money, if you just go by the last 20 years, probably going to be the Eagles, though. Right now, man, I have some serious questions about the Eagles roster. But, again, games aren't until September.
You have serious questions about the Eagles roster. Right now that you had serious questions when the season ended, but you said you still do. What's now the biggest serious question that you still have that hasn't been addressed?
Really not on offense. Well, I mean, minor questions. Right guard is obviously wide open. They hope Tyler Steen wins it. They may bring in someone to compete against him. Kid Cam Jurgens full-time play center. But look, Barkley will be way better here with the Eagles than he was with the Giants due to the offensive line and scheme. But it's really defensively. They don't have that veteran defensive tackle, and it's now Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter's run here. Davis did not have a good season, as we outlined on Inside the Birds. Greg Cosell told the truth. Greg loved him to start the season. He was blown away by how Davis looked. By midseason, he started to fade, and he really struggled in the second half with his weight and technique. That's not good. Carter faded late, trying for the big play, we were told by other teams that watch Eagles tape. Huff is a full-time player. We don't know yet. Devin White, could he Could he get himself righted? He had a bad year. Could Nakobe Dean finally stay healthy? What does Darius Slay have left? Because you're asking me these questions, Mike. Look at all these questions. This is legitimate. James Bradbury, right now he's on the roster. Again, if the season started today, he would be starting. That can't be good. He should have been benched. He struggled. He sort of got quasi-benched. They started to cut his playing time. Well, Mike, again, I've just given you the answers to the questions, but we're on April 2nd. Howie Roseman knows this. If you and I see this and your listeners hear this, well, Howie knows this, so he knows way more than we do.
Well, I want to get your – and I want to get – as we're talking with Adam Caplan, we'll leave you on this one here, because on Friday – you were on the air with me. I could barely hear what you were saying, but they made this trade, and now that we know what the trade is, they get a third-round pick in 2026 that could be a second-round pick. Now, this is generally how he sees it. He makes these trades, and everybody says, how did people keep trading with him? But when you look at this trade, do you think Howie made a good deal, or do you say, what was he thinking?
I understand what he was thinking, because they were not going to extend Reddick's contract. I just am surprised that they didn't get a conditional pick for 24-25. That is a little surprising, but as we kind of warned people 2 months ago when we came back from the Senior Bowl, that what we were hearing was not good about him remaining with the football team. It's a contract. I know people are trying to throw this out there. Reddick did not show that he's fading or he's regressing at all. That's just not factually correct. It's just that they've got to account for Nolan Smith. They want to get younger. And the bottom line is they just could not make it work with Reddick or make him happy. That's the other part where people don't understand. It just would not – they could never make him happy for what he – Haason saw all these extensions getting done and the kind of money these guys were getting, and the Eagles understood that and could never meet in the middle. And business is business, as he kind of talked about with the Jets media this week.
Adam Caplan, everybody, on a Football at 4, and, of course, we'll be looking at more NFL news, notes, draft stuff leading up to the draft as Football at 4 rolls into the summertime, into the spring. So much going on with this Eagles team, as they generally do, but that trade of Reddick, what's next, draft time, so much to discuss. Adam's back on Friday. Thank you, bud.
Thank you.
Adam Caplan, Football at 4, here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.